Hi everyone, and welcome to the Bear Necessities. I'm Bear, and today we are making shortbread. Classic Scottish shortbread. It's just a little lightly sweet biscuit cookie, depending on where you're from. Crunchy, crisp, buttery, delicious. And for this recipe, you really only need 3 ingredients, maybe 4, depending on one of the ingredients. What you'll need is 2 cups, or to be more precise, 240 grams of all-purpose flour. If you don't have a scale to weigh it out, 2 cups is good. What you'll do is get your scoop into your flour bin, however you store it, and just like pick up flour and then drop it back in, kind of fluffing it up a little bit. Then scoop up a full scoop and then level it off. You can use your finger or a knife, something like that. And then do 2 of those, and that'll be good solid measurements there. That way it's kind of pre-sifted, it's not compacted, you're not getting too much flour. Then you will need 2 sticks of butter. It's about a cup if you're going to use something like coconut oil, which I wouldn't 100% recommend just because of the flavor and how oily it can stay even at room temperature sometimes. Margarine's okay, especially if you're vegan, of course. Or that's going to be about 230 grams. I believe I'm using Kerrygold, and that comes in 227 gram packs, which is 8 ounces there, so perfect. So that's your butter, and mine is salted, and that's the 4th ingredient. Otherwise, you're going to need half a teaspoon of salt. And then finally, you need half a cup of fine sugar. Granulated sugar is okay in this recipe, but it's better if it's fine. And the way you can do fine, instead of buying it at the store, because there's no reason for that, and you cannot use powdered sugar in this, is if you own a blender or a food processor, throw your sugar in there, pulse it for just a minute or so. It won't break everything up, but it'll grind it down enough that it'll be finer pieces, and that way it'll actually melt into the biscuit a lot better, and it'll give it a better texture. That's all. And so that's how that is. If you don't have any of these, and finding fine sugar or just buying fine sugar for like a single recipe, I mean, you'll use it, but there's no reason. Just use granulated. It'll be okay. Don't worry about it. It's just minor differences. You do what you gotta do. That's all I'm saying. It's a cookie. It's gonna taste good. So I'm going to be adding a little bit of vanilla to mine just because I'm going to be using these shortbread in another recipe later on. And you usually don't add liquid ingredients to these. I'm adding a teaspoon of vanilla. So I'm not adding too much liquid, no more than what would normally be in like wetter, fresher butter. So it's okay at that point, but I wouldn't suggest ever adding much more than that. You can use candied fruit, candied ginger, things like that. They go really lovely. Rosemary is incredible inside of shortbread. That sweetness with the herbiness, even basil, things like that. Works super well, goes great with tea. So, experiment a little bit. Let's get started. So I have my butter at very much room temperature. Like, this is just soft as can be. And I'm just going to go ahead and get it into my flour. You can use fork, a whisk, wooden spoon, whatever you got. I have my little dough whisk right here, so I'll be using that. And you're just going to break the butter up into the flour just enough that it's starting to take on a sandy texture. And again, whoops, got a little excited there with my flour. And again, my butter was salted, so I won't be adding any additional salt. But otherwise, this is where you'll be adding in your half teaspoon of salt. into your recipe. I'm making a 1.5 batch, so my measurements are off from yours, but I gave you a standard batch recipe. Right, now we're going to add in our sugar. I'm using allulose in mine because y'all know me. I try to make it less sugar if I can. Plus allulose tends to be a lot finer, and it caramelizes up really well. And we want to get that just mixed in. It doesn't have to be super perfect because we don't want this overworked. We don't want a lot of gluten in this. And finally, I'm just going to add my little splash, not even a teaspoon of vanilla. I was going to measure it. Not worried about it. That was maybe half a teaspoon. I just need that hint of flavor. Not much. You can also do cinnamon in these, nutmeg, do pumpkin spice ones with chai tea. Oh, that would be lovely. Something like that. All right, we've got this pretty much mixed together. I see no big chunks of butter or anything, or flour, no dry pockets, so that's what we need. And this recipe is great for an 8x8 or a 9x9 square pan. It'll be a little thinner, obviously, in the 9x9, but not much. I have an 11.5 by 11.5, which is why I'm doing a 1.5 time recipe. And I have a piece of parchment in the bottom of mine. You can oil, butter your pan, whatever. There's a tremendous amount of butter in these. I'm not worried about that. The parchment's just so I can flip it out and it'll remove without cracking. But otherwise I'm not really worried about it sticking. So we're just going to plots that right in. And I didn't mention, but I'm using 2/3 to 1/3 all-purpose flour to whole wheat flour, just for the texture and the flavor for mine. As with whole wheat, you can replace, it's normally up to 20%. I'm actually replacing about 30% of the total weight with whole wheat flour. And this is full cracked whole wheat, so I'm gonna get those nice chewy fiber bits and all the wheat germ and everything from that. And I'm just using my impeccably clean hands to press this into all the corners. You'll notice that it's not going to stick to you despite sugar and everything else being in there. Just because, again, all that butter, there's so much butter. These were originally cookies for the wealthy. Some of the earliest recipes were around in the 14 and 1500s, and they were held for nobility because butter was so expensive. And refined flours were so much harder to really make. The grinding and pressing and sieving and everything else. So having fine pastries, things like that, especially pastries that involved a lot of sweetening, which sugar, but also honey, things like that. And then butter. That was definitely a royal or noble treat. And if you were someone who was just kind of a little bit better off than others, every now and then maybe you'd get to show off. But otherwise, not very common. Alrighty, so I've got that fairly level in my pan, from what I can tell. These will not take their own level, so they are going to need as much coercing as possible. I'm actually going to grab a fork really quick. Most traditional way of doing this is just poking holes with a fork or something with tines in straight lines, and a lot of people will take a knife or something and then cut down between the rows of tines just to kind of pre-score the cookies, like to pre-mark the cut points. Because while it bakes, those will melt a little bit and they'll kind of go back together, but the markings will still be there. And of course, when we take these out of the oven while they're still very fresh, we can actually refresh those holes, and as it cools, they'll stay there. But it's a way for them to not get too puffy, and it's also just a very traditional decoration. And so we have all of our holes punched in, and I'm going to pre-score mine, but I'm doing mine into squares. And so I will be doing a 4x4 score. And again, this will melt in, but I'll be able to see it later on. And it'll help me when I'm cutting up the dessert I will be making later. And at this point, let's go ahead and get our ovens preheating to 350 degrees because we are going to stray from standard recipes a slight bit right now. So you don't have to pre-score yours. I'm going to. And yes, you can taste it because it's flour and butter. It's not great to eat raw flour, but a little bit's not going to hurt you. Oh, that's good. And that little bit of vanilla. Oh, that's so perfect. I'm going to pop this into the fridge for about 10 minutes, so the time it's going to take for my oven to finish preheating. And once it's nice and chilled through, I'm going to pop this in the oven, again, 350 degrees. That's Fahrenheit, or, let me check my scale there, 175°C. Or if you have a convection oven, which my big oven is not, 325 degrees Fahrenheit, or 165°C. There we go. I swear I will learn them eventually, but until then I have the thing on the fridge. But let me get these chilled. I'm going to pop them in the oven, and then I will get them baked between 30 and 35 minutes. They will be a light golden color. That's when they're done. You take them out, you let them cool in the pan, and then you take them out of the pan and let them finish cooling at room temperature on a rack. So I'll see y'all back with some fresh shortbread. All right, y'all, so I'm back. The shortbread has finished, and it's actually cooled for about an hour, hour and a half. I got it down to room temperature completely, so it's actually almost cold because it's basically summer in Texas. It's the middle of May, so yeah. I did take a little sample bite earlier because I love shortbread already. Sorry if you didn't hear that. I love shortbread already, and I wanted to make sure it actually, it passed the test, but yeah. I know you probably can't hear it, but it's crisp. A slight sweetness to it. It's really light sweetness. But then all that butter, that is indulgent and rich, and yet surprisingly light. It's nice. I like it. I would take them all out of the pan, but I actually need these for the next recipe. So if you watch for next week, we are going to be doing millionaire bars. So I will see y'all back then. And until then, bye.